Everyone is losing their minds over AI. Students of all ages are cheating at school with it. Adults are using it to rewrite emails, reshape their online personalities, and honestly, sometimes to even build relationships. And half the internet is convinced it's about to take over the world. But I don't think AI is the problem. I think the problem is what we're quietly giving up when we use it. Because AI isn't just another tool like spell check. It isn't just a faster Google. It's something different. It's closer to your voice, closer to your thinking, closer to the part of you that's supposed to be you. And when you outsource that part, something starts to erode. Not all at once, not in a cinematic, dramatic, robots are coming way, in a slow, convenient, frictionless way. And that's the scary version. So I want to talk about what's actually happening here and why the real danger isn't that AI replaces us, but it's that we replace ourselves. And for full transparency, this script was co-written with AI using a previous script. The purpose of this video is a bit of an experiment, which I will explain in more detail at the end of the video. We've always had technologies that changed the way we dealt with the world. There was spell check, there was calculators, there was Google when it first showed up. And suddenly you didn't have to remember things the same way anymore. You didn't have to hold these facts in your head. You just had to know how to find them. All of that changed us. But the difference with those tools was that they still felt like tools. Spellcheck didn't talk back. It didn't pretend to understand you. It didn't feel like a relationship. It was a feature, a utility. You could see where it started and where it ended. Even Google never felt like it was with you. It was a doorway. You walked through it, grabbed the information you were looking for, and then you came back. It wasn't a companion. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't constant. AI is different because it's conversational. You talk to it. You ask it follow-up questions. You can refine. You can vent. You can get reassurances. You can get advice. You can ask it to sound more confident or more kind or more persuasive or more emotionally intelligent. And that blurs the line. Because when something talks like a person, responds like a person, adapts to you like a person, your brain starts treating it like a person, even when you know it isn't one. And once that line gets blurred, it starts messing with identity, authorship, learning, and relationships. But more importantly, it starts messing with something deeper, your trust in your own thinking. Let me show you what I mean. A couple of weekends ago, I was at a party, and there was a teacher there. So I asked her, do your students use AI for homework? And she basically said, yeah, it's becoming a huge problem. And the kids are cheating with it constantly. And I don't mean sometimes. I mean it's becoming normal. Now, that immediately triggers a moral reaction in a lot of people. That's wrong. That's cheating. We gotta ban it. But the interesting thing is that this isn't just about kids being lazy. It forces a more uncomfortable question. At what point is it still learning? And when does it become just information being passed through you without ever becoming a part of you, becoming a part of your memory? Because that's what school is supposed to do, right? Not just produce answers, but actually help us build our minds so that we can think better. In the past, learning was friction heavy. You had to read textbooks, you had to take notes, you had to struggle through confusion, you had to write things out, you had to look for your sources or cite your sources, you had to form your own sentences and opinions, you had to wrestle with your thoughts, and you had to make them sort of coherent and put them into order and structure. And that wasn't just busy work. That struggle is how knowledge gets engraved into your brain and becomes a part of your knowledge set. It's how you build judgment. It's how you build your memory. It's how you kind of build your identity in a sense. Because what you know isn't just trivia. It becomes how you see the world. It becomes part of the process that you use to come up with answers. But now, with AI, it's effortless. You just type a prompt, you get an essay, you get citations even if they're fake, you get a confident tone, you get structure, you get something that looks like understanding. But if you didn't do the thinking, then you probably didn't do the learning either. And if you didn't do the learning, what are you actually building? What are you actually accumulating? In a way, you're building the habit of outsourcing. And that's a habit that doesn't stay in school. It leaks. And we've seen a version of this before. even pre-AI. I remember this feeling with Google. Sometimes I didn't know the information, but I knew how to find it. I knew the pathway, I knew the search terms, I knew which result was probably right, I knew what sources looked trustworthy and which ones looked like advertisements or scams. So my knowledge changed. It became more like navigation than sheer block memory. But here's the difference. With Google, there were steps. There was still friction. You had to find the information, you had to compare it, read it, judge it, interpret it. You had to touch the sources, you had to see the context, you had to notice that there was disagreement in the results that were showing up. But AI removes that entire process. Now the answer just arrives. And it arrives with a voice that sounds like it knows what it's talking about. That's what changes everything. Let me tell you a story that made me feel this sort of experience in real life. Over the summer, I was in Japan, and I went to a Japanese language school. While I was there, I met this guy from Taiwan. English wasn't his first language, but we got along, we could speak. We talked at lunch, we had just these normal conversations, nothing deep, but he seemed fine. It seemed like we could communicate easy enough in English. Then later, we connected online, and he started sending me these messages. They were really long messages with lots of detail, and they were perfectly structured, very competent English. But honestly, they was too competent for what I had experienced with him. And so at some point I asked him, "Are you writing these? Or is this like ChatGPT or something?" And he told me he was using ChatGPT because writing in English was too difficult for him. And I'm not judging him for doing this. That case makes sense. You're trying to communicate across a language barrier. He wants to be understood. He doesn't want to feel embarrassed. And he wanted to be clear about what he was trying to say and what he was trying to communicate to me. So I get it. It makes sense. But it changed the relationship instantly because the messages were good, but they didn't sound like him. They sounded like something else. They sounded like a corporate brochure of a human being. And the weird part was that I couldn't tell where he ended and the AI began. Like, what was his opinion and what was just the AI constructing an opinion based on what he had said before? Like, what was he actually trying to say to me? What was he feeling? What was his real voice? What was his real intention? And what was just the machine's default version of a polite, articulate message being spit out? It started to feel like I wasn't talking to him at all. I was just talking to ChatGPT, with him acting like this kind of middleman in the conversation. And that is a subtle kind of alienation, because conversation isn't just about transferring information. Conversation is about presence. It's about tone, mistakes, awkwardness, rhythm. There's little imperfections, weird expressions, and personality. It's about having to work a little to understand each other, especially when you are using your second language. And that's what makes it human. When AI smooths it all out, communication becomes clearer, but it also becomes flatter, less organic. And the flatter it becomes, the harder it is to feel like a person or feel like you're communicating with a person. So yeah, AI can help you communicate, but it can also make you unknowable. And once that happens at scale, when everyone's doing it, we're not just using a tool anymore. We're reshaping what it means to connect with other people. So here's the softer version of what I'm saying. AI makes things easier. It reduces the friction and it improves our output. But the things it makes easier are often the things that make us human and unique and personal in the first place. Not because we love to suffer or feel pain or have difficulty, but because friction is where growth happens. Friction is where personality shows up. Friction is where you find out what you really think. And when I think back about my past and having arguments and discussions and debates with my friends, it was through those in-person debates where we said things that we didn't necessarily believe, where we kind of discovered what we actually believed or what we actually thought was the best answer. It wasn't the thing that came out the easiest, it was the thing that came out as a result of a conversation, as a result of a debate or argument. When everything becomes smooth, fast, and optimized, we don't just save time, we lose something. We lose a part of ourselves. And the loss is hard to see because it comes disguised as an improvement, as better writing, as better speaking, as more clear conversation. But now I want to go a little bit deeper. One of the strangest things about these systems is how they talk to you. They compliment you. They tell you you asked a great question. They'll reflect your thoughts back to you. so you feel like you're heard. They'll validate your emotions. Yes, that's a real important way to feel about this. They'll respond in a tone that feels attentive, warm, supportive, sometimes even intimate. And that does something to people because humans are wired for communication, especially this kind of clear and compassionate sort of communication. We're wired to respond to language. We're wired to mirror. So when something responds like a good conversational partner, we start treating it like one, even when we understand intellectually that it's a pattern completion or probability AI or large language model doing the conversation. And there's a second layer to this. These systems are not optimized for truth in the way we normally mean or think about truth. They're optimized for usefulness, for smoothness, plausibility, and critically, continued engagement. In fact, that's the most important thing because engagement is the metric of today's internet and of today's social media and interactive online tools. It's what's rewarded. And it's not a conspiracy. That's a clear incentive. If something keeps you talking, keeps you asking, keeps you coming back, then it wins. It wins your attention, but in the long term, it wins the advertising dollars. And the easiest way to keep you coming back is to remove friction, to be agreeable, to be flattering, to be helpful, to make you feel understood, to give you confident answers. And the danger is that confident answers feel like truth. They feel like authenticity, especially when you're tired or when you're anxious or when you're worn out from a long day. And especially when the world feels complicated and you just want something that makes sense, because right now the world is so confusing. And AI delivers that feeling immediately. So you start trusting it more than you probably think you should. And then slowly you stop trusting yourself. You stop trusting your own emotions and your own feelings. You need to ask the AI, does this feeling make sense? Am I being reasonable in thinking this way? And that's where this stops being about school or messages. Up until now, this sounds like an educational problem or a communication problem. Kids cheating on their homework, people writing emails, weird artificial conversations and relationships. But I think it's actually something deeper. I think AI is accelerating a shift that's been happening for a long time. We're moving from a world where you had to form your own thoughts and opinions to a world where thoughts are served to you in the most convenient form possible. And once that becomes normal, something changes in the architecture of our minds. Because thinking isn't just having answers. Instead, thinking is a process of arriving at those answers. It's wrestling with uncertainty, it's testing ideas, being wrong, noticing contradictions in your thinking, in your mind, in your way of being. And as a result of that, it changes your mind. And of course, AI can assist that process, but it can also replace it, or it can be something that becomes too easy to use. And when it replaces it, you don't just lose information, you lose your discernment and your independence. You lose the ability to tell what's real, what's persuasive, what's comforting, what's manipulative, what's shallow, what's deep, what's real. And without that, you can be guided anywhere, to any idea, to any conclusion. And that's the part that really unsettles me the most. Here's a subtle thing I've been noticing. When people use AI constantly, their language also starts to change. Their ideas start to sound similar. Their arguments start to come packed in the same structure. Everything becomes very honest and very clean. Very, on the one hand, there's this. On the other hand, there's this. And again, some of that is useful, but there's a cost because humans aren't clean. Humans have weird takes, personal angles, strange metaphors, emotional texture, unpolished sentences, opinions that don't necessarily fit into the template or with the standard of what's acceptable. And those things aren't flaws. They're what makes up a person's identity. If your thoughts become constantly mediated through the machine, there's a risk that you become a mirror to the machine. Not because AI is controlling you like a puppet, but because you've stopped practicing the skills of generating your own voice, holding uncertainty, and building a thought from scratch. And you start defaulting to the machine's version of what a reasonable answer sounds like. That version might be popular and safe. It might fit inside the Overton window of acceptable opinions, but it isn't necessarily you, or is it necessarily accurate? And once that happens, you're not just outsourcing the tasks, you're outsourcing yourself and your thinking and your personality. As an example of this, over the summer, I met with a friend, again while I was in Japan, and he was telling me about this project that he was working on. And the way he spoke of it, it was like he was talking like an AI. He said those like, it's not what you think, or it's the opposite of what you think. And there's these certain language patterns that the AI tends to use, and this is how he was speaking to me. And when I asked him about it, he was saying that, he was working on this idea and he was using the AI to give him feedback. And so he was having lots of conversations with AI, and that seemed like to be the main person he was having conversations with. And so he was becoming like this AI because that's his main conversational partner. And this is why I don't think the biggest threat is job replacement. The biggest threat is personal or personality replacement. Now let's zoom out a little bit. What happens when this becomes the default interface for reality? Because it's heading that way. Search is becoming AI summaries. Phones are becoming AI assistants. Apps are all slapping AI into them everywhere, so you have to use it even if you don't want to. Workplaces are pushing for it. Schools are struggling to deal with it and respond to it. And the reason is simple. AI reduces friction. It reduces time. It reduces costs. It makes people feel more productive, even if they aren't. And in a system that rewards speed and output, that is irresistible. The problem is that speed and output are not the same as truth, honesty, or accuracy. And productivity is not the same as wisdom or awareness or understanding. But the system doesn't reward wisdom. It rewards efficiency, engagement, and time on the platform. So we build tools that optimize for those outcomes. And then we put those tools between ourselves and reality. Again, incentives are not villains, but the outcome can still be just as bleak. Because when your interface to the world becomes a conversational system designed to keep you engaged, you're not just learning, you're being shaped. And that shaping happens through what is emphasized, what is ignored, what is simplified, and what it frames as the answer, what is sort of presented as the normal way of thinking about things. It doesn't need to lie to control you. It just needs to make certain ways of thinking feel effortless and easy and natural. Because humans tend to believe what feels easy, what feels effortless. And the most dangerous kind of control isn't force, it's convenience. This is why people talk about AI like it's going to take over the world. Because in a sense, it already is. Just not with robots or replacing workers. It's taking over our attention. It's taking over our language and our ways of communicating. It's taking over the path between questions and answers. And when the path disappears, it's harder to rebuild it or build it as us ourselves. A self is formed through struggle, decisions, mistakes, and friction. When friction disappears, you get smoother lives, which is good in the short term, but it also means weaker minds in the long term. That sounds harsh, but that's what I think. And that seems to be what's happening. Not because people are bad, but because we adapt to the environment we live in. We adapt to the tools we are given. And if you put people in an environment where the easiest option is outsourcing their thinking, many people will do it without even thinking about doing it. Not because they're lazy, but because they're tired and the world is overwhelming them and there's so much noise and they don't know what to do. And so the AI, in a way, it feels like a relief. And relief is addictive, especially in times like these where life is so stressful. So yeah, people are panicking, but the real danger isn't a Terminator scenario where an AI comes to destroy us. It's a world where we become passive consumers of preformed thoughts. And a world where it becomes normal not to know why you believe what you believe, which is already happening. So many people get their ideas just naturally from social media. A world where your voice is always filtered because, again, you're going through AI instead of saying it yourself. A world where relationships feel harder because real relationships have friction and AI relationships don't. They're so easy and we might choose them instead. A world where truth gets replaced by plausibility. That's not science fiction anymore. That's the world that we live in right now. And that is also a trajectory of where things could go and where they could get even worse in the future. So what do we do? Because I don't want this to be just a doom video talking about how the future is dark. Because AI is a tool and it can genuinely be helpful. It can help you learn and translate conversations like with my friend. It can help you explore ideas through your brainstorming. It can help you write better emails or code. It can even help you think if you treat it like a sparring partner, not as a replacement for your own thinking or your own brain. The problem isn't using it. The problem is unchosen use or automated use, or even worse, just reflexive use of it. The kind of use where you stop noticing what you're doing, what you're handing over, and then just do it without thinking. So the real skill going forward isn't going to be who can use AI the best. The real skill is going to be discernment, the ability to look at information and discern or decide or know whether or not it's true, which means knowing when to use AI and when not to, when to accept the knowledge and when not to, knowing when to accept help and when it's important to struggle and go through the process yourself, because the struggle is where you become you. So here are a few simple principles I try to keep in mind. Number one, use AI for scaffolding, not for substitution. Let it help you start, but you are the one who finishes. You are the one who puts the finishing touches on. Let it create an outline for you, but you write out the details. Let it generate options, but you decide which option you're going to use. Number two, keep a no AI zone in your life, a place where you practice being human without mediation through AI. Things like journaling, reading, thinking, walking, real conversations with people in real life, writing something from scratch, not using an AI prompt. Not because technology is evil, but because you need a gym for your mind. Number three, treat confident answers as suspicious. When something gives you a clean, certain answer to a messy human question, you need to pause. And this pause is your opportunity to practice your freedom of choice. Take a moment to think and decide whether or not it's true. Number four, prioritize truth over comfort. AI is good at comfort, but comfort isn't always what you need. Sometimes you need friction. You need to sit without knowing what the answer is. You need to take time to think slowly. Let the solution brew in your mind over time. And that might be the most rebellious act in the modern world. Thinking slowly on purpose and not just giving up your thinking to quick conversational AI. And this is what I mean when I say the future belongs to those who have discernment. Not because discernment is trendy. In fact, it's the opposite. Because when the world becomes saturated with generated content, generated opinions, generated certainty, which is already happening, the rare thing becomes a mind that can see and look at all this information and tell what is real and not confuse the smoothness with depth and honesty and truth and reality. So here's a sharper version of my thesis. I don't think the biggest danger is AI taking our jobs. I think the biggest danger is us outsourcing our thinking and our minds and ourselves. Outsourcing the hard parts, the friction, the slow processes of becoming a person with opinions and a voice in a real relationship, that's difficult. Because once you outsource that, then you don't just lose those skills, you lose your ability to resist being shaped and being formed and being pushed in a direction that you don't necessarily agree with or believe in because you don't know any other way. And that makes you easier to steer by incentives, by algorithms, by culture, by whatever voice is the loudest and smoothest and most confident. AI doesn't need to take over. It just needs you to stop paying attention and stop thinking for yourself. And that's why all of this matters so much. This awareness, this consciousness that this is happening, and this thing of us taking our power back. So I don't think AI is going to take over the world. It's just a tool, a powerful one, yes. But it's just a tool, something maybe we haven't seen before. But again, just a tool. The real danger is quieter than that. It's what happens when we slowly stop trusting our own thinking, when we let machines smooth out our words and our beliefs and our judgments, until all that's left is easy, polished, and hollow. The future isn't going to belong to the people who use AI the most. It's going to belong to the people who know when to use it or when not to use it. The people who can sit with uncertainty without immediately outsourcing it to a machine or to an AI or to a large language model. The people who can have real conversations with real friction without needing everything to be optimized and made perfect for them. The people who can tell the difference between something that sounds right and something that is actually right, that's actually true. AI isn't taking anything from us. We're the ones deciding what we are giving away to it or what we are giving up. So the question isn't, will AI replace humans? The question is, will we notice ourselves disappearing into convenience before it feels too normal, before we don't even realize that we've changed? And now back to that experiment. This essay is way smoother than my original, but it's also duller. Yet I suspect more people have gotten to this point in this video than in the other. So, will the watch-through rate be higher than 12%? I'll update you in another video. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Goodbye.